Okay, well, speaking of things being let out of the bag, of course, his identity has been let out of the bag. It's been published in Toronto Life and other avenues that his full name is Dan Bergeron.
Right.
Now that his name is out, of course, this changes things. I mean, there's a reason that you guys try to keep your identity secret. Now, so far so good as far as any legal ramifications, to the best of my knowledge. But do you think that him being outed now, well, is he, does it lose him almost the title of street artist? Maybe now that he's outed and he's doing commercial work, he should just, go for the gold. Just go with it. I mean, just do whatever. Just do stuff for himself, do stuff for the company. It's almost like, doing an indie film versus doing a big Hollywood film. Either way, like, why can't he move in between now that he's outed? Do you feel that now that he's been outed, does it change things? Does it matter anymore even now that he's been outed? Or does the issue remain more or less the same, simply with an added detail?
Well, he hasn't been outed as a result of this Vespahead campaign. He was openly out long before it.
Oh, was he?
Yes.
I've only heard his name since this happened. So
Again,
I
it's
assume it was
overshadowed
phenomenal,
his previous career, unfortunately.
Okay.
But no, he hasn't been outed. I think he just became out.
As anyone does who gains fame, yes. Okay. Well, what do you think of that? I mean, do you think it's kind of brave that he's let his name out there, given that it's,
Well, I think that's a personal choice for artists. I don't know. I don't want it myself ever.
No.
That's another rant. But, yeah, I don't ever want to be a hyphen name or Posterchild, a.k.a.
Bradley Pitt.
Yeah, I don't want to deal with that. And I also, one of the reasons I really like working on the street, and one of the reasons I really like working with anonymity, is that people aren't judging my work through the filter of my personality. You may have heard, if you follow street art, that recently a reporter in London claims to have exposed Banksy.
Yeah, with photos from some work he did in the Caribbean, I believe.
Which actually was a kerfuffle on the internet like years ago.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't know, it was just online.
That's about 2 years old, and then he just looks up the article of it. Such as some journalists, yes.
I've been really impressed with the online reaction, which has been next to nothing.
Yeah.
People are like, we don't care, we don't need to know, we don't want to know. And I think that's great. It would be terrible. Like, some of the things the article suggests are exactly the sort of things that I love not having to deal with in street art, where they say, oh, Banksy, this urban hero, comes from a middle-class school. Doesn't that change all his work? He came from not complete destitute.
He's not a complete Robin Hood figure. Yeah.
There's nothing worse in any sort of indie scene to an outsider than coming from money.
Oh yeah.
That is.
And that's maybe one of the most frustrating things. Even as a person looking from the outside in, I sometimes have trouble with the street art scene in the sense that, kind of like the punk scene before that became completely appropriated, I see something that's talking about rebellion, something that's talking about moving outside of the system, something about doing new ideas, and just it all seems to be moving outside of molds and allowing freedom. I see, right? But then when you get things like this thing with Faux Reel, or like things there, where Banksy maybe came from money, whatever, right? It seems you start to get the feeling that there's actually a very strict, semi-unspoken set of rules for what is acceptable in a street artist, and so.
Well, I think it's important not to conflate entirely street art and graffiti. Graffiti is very dogmatic in a lot of its rules, but one of the rules, which again, every graffiti artist or street artist will bring their own prejudices with them, but one of the tenets of graffiti is that you make a new name and you build it up, and you are respected by the quality and the amount that you do that. And it doesn't matter whether you came, like, this is a misconception that's outside the graffiti world a lot of people have, that it came entirely from poor Black and Latino cultures. Certainly those cultures had a large influence, but right from the beginning, it was directly across all social strata, like rich, poor, middle class, and all ethnicities. It was never exclusive as people imagine it to be.
Yeah.
And it was welcoming to anyone as long as they were. The thing about graffiti, especially then, or now in certain, street art is. But the thing about graffiti then is that it was so dangerous and so unrewarding. Like, now we have people making money off of it. Not just a Faux Reel model, but also the Banksy model.
Gallery sales, of course. Yes, we would never thought of this 30 years ago, 35 years ago.
It was just so not a thing that anyone would have any interest in unless they are just down for it. So if you were down for it, you were fine. It didn't matter if your parents had money.
Okay, so coming to the here and now, right? I mean, you know, where we have a lot of people doing it. So I imagine we almost have some misguided souls trying to do it for money, of course, ever since hearing about Banksy, right? And you know, the money he's made. I mean, you're always going to get somebody, a minority, I'm sure.
And they're going to be disappointed.
They're going to be disappointed, probably, yeah. So you know, maybe the standards have changed and shifted a little bit now that we have these kinds of folk coming into it, and maybe it's a bit, you know, the witch hunts are not entirely validated, but some degree of a pecking order is perhaps made valid now because you have these people getting for different reasons. Like, I mean,
pecking. Who's pecking order?
Well, it seems to be whenever something happens that marks a street artist as an outsider in his outside realm, right? As coming from money, as you know, having had success, as doing this and that and the other thing, that everyone else, or almost everyone else, enough that it seems like a horde, all turn in on that person.
Street artists? Graffiti artists?
Fans thereof. And to a degree, street artists and graffiti artists, or at least people who go out there and write on these things. The people who go out there and write sell out on a Vespahead. You know, I see that, and I mean, there's many other cases, and to come back to the topic at hand, right? There are many cases of these Vespaheads being defaced by people who are very angered by what's happened. And so, you know, as I say, it's this thing where you have supposedly people who are working in something where I see a lot of focus on freedom of expression, but the second something is done which moves outside of these strict, semi-unspoken guidelines, you have a large grouping of individuals who turn in on it.
That's what I'm saying. Graffiti is not that unclear in its guidelines. In fact, it's very straightforward. And it's again not important. It's important not to conflate graffiti and street art because they're two very different things. And while I suppose it doesn't make that much of a difference to a street artist, any graffiti artist is not going to want to be called. You have to understand, to most taggers, I am an art fag, who is on the leading edge of this selling out of the subculture, who have watered it down to and brought it into galleries. Look where we are. This is not dolls. What are you doing, faggot? You know, like that's.
It's a shame it often comes back to the homophobic tags, right?
Well.
But that's another story, yeah.
Anyway, in graffiti, I mean, it's very simple. You're just to do it and do it often, and do it well, and do it in high places, and not ever do it for anybody but yourself. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's a matter of, well, you can do it for your crew or whatever, but
but generally not for some sort of boss figure, some sort of manager.
I mean, that's completely not graffiti. Graffiti is all about fame and the individual. It's a very American, very individualistic subculture. Okay. And again, I'm speaking as an outsider. I can't claim graffiti, and I wouldn't try to.
I wouldn't know who could.
But so it's looking at it from there, it's very easy to understand why anyone within that group would be very upset that someone who is identified, even as a street artist, is being associated with that group to some degree, has now hired on, given himself a boss. One of the things I said in the other interview was that I would like to see, if this is going to happen, more towards a skateboard model of sponsorship, where instead of this Faux Reel's work was a commission, where they got him to change his content, keep his aesthetic, and do a commissioned work to their specifications. If they had just said, look, like in the skateboarding model, we love what you do, don't change it.
Just do your
thing. We just want our name associated with your coolness. Have a free Vespa, or have $2,000. And when you meet someone on the street and you're doing your thing with your Vespa, just be like, yeah, man, whatever.
Vespa's all right.
Vespa's, yeah, like it's
okay. Well, this actually brings me into my next question here.